This video is brought to you by Paragon, my own original sci-fi novel, now available on Amazon. Check the description for links where you can buy. So a while back I talked about my personal favourite worlds of spaceships and aliens, and now it's time to move on to more fantastical realms of dragons, swords and sorcery. These are my top 5 fantasy universes. Also, if I sound kinda weird, it's because I think I have a cold. Number 5. Conan, the Hyborian Age. Conan is a uniquely magic low setting, taking place in a forgotten age beyond the word ancient. And it's this truly distant past which lends the world of Conan the Barbarian a real grit and brutality. The kingdoms travelled have only reached the cusp of true society, being mashed together from later cultures and societies. If you haven't seen the first Conan the Barbarian movie, it's a real hidden gem, and the books by Robert E. Howard are even better. While the subsequent Conan movies are huge letdowns, the source material occupies a distinctive space in the pantheon of fantasy. This low fantasy Hyborian Age is a platform for almost limitless adventure, and Conan himself is the perfect instrument to explore this vanished age with. Another great movie or TV series is simply begging to be made set in this less conventional fantasy universe. Number 4. Avatar: The Last Airbender. The world of Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of the most creative fictional universes I've ever seen. What no doubt began as a simple thought experiment, what if people could control the elements with martial arts, ballooned into a striking world of intricate societies and nuanced characters. Whereas the typical fantasy realm pulls from medieval history or ancient mythology, The Last Airbender draws upon everything from Renaissance Europe to the feudal Far East. Bizarre animals, stunning vistas, and a strikingly fleshed out world sits atop this awesomely imaginative element-bending warfare. Watching the variety of clever ways element bending is used within this world is a constant delight, and having a complex and quirky world to explore on top of that is a gluttony of riches for the viewer. Number 3. Warhammer Fantasy. I gave a shout out to the space-based 40k in my previous video, and the fantasy counterpoint is truly fantastic. What's so attractive about the Warhammer Fantasy universe is its surprising depth. This isn't just a texture swap of generic orcs versus humans, but a cool mix of Lovecraftian cosmic myth, high fantasy magic, as well as complex politics. A simple glance at Warhammer creates an impression of something virtually indistinguishable from something like World of Warcraft. But look a little deeper and there's a lot more going on. Factions aren't simply divided into their races, definitions of good and evil aren't so strict in this world. Thus, to play the tabletop game or read through the various novels is an experience more akin to Game of Thrones as opposed to Lord of the Rings. Speaking of which, number 2, Game of Thrones Westeros. At the time of writing, Game of Thrones is in the process of wrapping up its final season, and what a journey it's been. George R. R. Martin's seminal work takes the layered world building of Tolkien, the grit of Robert E. Howard, and the stranger-than-fiction political backstabbing of real-life medieval history. Many fans believe that the show has lost its edge in its later seasons, but the world of the show and the novels is a setting where anything could happen. The brutality and fragile peace makes us afraid for our favourite characters, quite unlike any other traditional fantasy story can. The lore, steeped in magic, dragons, and other mythological creatures, feels just as grounded and believable as the political power struggles and conflicts over noble bloodlines. The world of Westeros and the neighbouring Essos and the conflicts therein feel like history come to life rather than the imaginings of a talented writer, which is a stunning achievement. And now some honourable mentions. Jason and the Argonauts. This is kind of more general ancient Greek mythology and not technically a proper fantasy universe, so I guess Clash of the Titans could be included here too. If you haven't watched my video Why Ray Harryhausen is Awesome, you totally should because it's the best video I've ever made and it deserves way more views, no humility here. I talk a lot about my love of ancient mythology, and it was one of the main inspirations in creating my own universe in my novel Paragon. Boom, 2 shameless plugs in one go. But in general, I love ancient mythologies like ancient Greece or Egypt, and I will jump at the chance to see any movie or read any book about it, even the real bad ones. But without further ado, on to number 1, you've all guessed it, Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth. Lord of the Rings is the original, and while I'm sure you could argue many of the other editions on this list have surpassed it, Middle-earth was personally my introduction to the awesomeness of the fantasy genre. Middle-earth is the great all-rounder fantasy world. You want excellent layered world building with a long history and lived-in vibe? Tolkien pioneered that. You want the charming fun of hobbits and dwarves? You got it. You want epic battles and high fantasy magic? Right this way. The world of Lord of the Rings is the defining fantasy setting, the world which every other fantasy world is compared to and measured against. While The Last Airbender may have a more creative central concept, and Game of Thrones may have a greater edge, Middle-earth is the high standard fantasy world which even after an epic trilogy still has so much to offer. That is why it's my personal favourite. Travis Linton asks, if you were assigned to the Enterprise, what job would you personally hope for? This is a pretty tough one. As much as I appreciate science and technology, I'm very rubbish at maths, so I'd probably be pretty weak in that department. However, I do love history and can write a lot, so if the Enterprise ever came across something ancient or needed some historical expert, I'd take a stab at that. I just hope some wibbly wobbly swirly cloud thing doesn't kill me before the opening credits. If you like my videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all my new uploads. You can see videos early on my Patreon for as little as $5 a month. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank my patrons David Phelps, Chris Lord, Andy Luke, Larry Bennett, James Vanderhaeg, T. Stoney, L. Carton and Millie Coleman. Until next time, have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.